Good Sunday morning, everyone. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Thanks for being here. I see a few of you have already popped on early before the live stream started, like Impervious Entity and Jake and G. White and Scott Briller. So a happy Sunday to you on this rather hot and steamy Sunday here in the East and in the Northeast. Thankfully, the rain has gone away finally after all the issues that we were dealing yesterday with the flash flooding. But I want to start front and center today with Hurricane Hector as it continues to move to the west with top winds of 125 miles an hour. It is a Category 3 hurricane, and we'll probably see some fluctuations in strength over the next couple of days. At times, we'll probably wind up seeing some bursts higher, and at other times, we'll probably wind up seeing some bursts lower, such as the nature of these things. And first off, we're going to take a look at the satellite loop. We'll be using, by the way, the 8 a.m. advisory Pacific time. Okay, so we're talking 11 a.m. Eastern time. I've got all the new advisories up from the National Hurricane Center. A couple of things right off the bat. The satellite images and that you're seeing today, most of them, are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, Levi Cowan's great site, along with the weather models that we are going to show you. So you can see more of this and other stuff at tropicaltidbits.com. Also, when it comes to hurricanes, tropical storms, you need to, with regards to whatever it is you have to do, please consult your local government officials and also consult the National Hurricane Center's website at nhc.noaa.gov. And in the case of Hawaii, you would want to go to your Hawaii National Weather Service page, and you can access all National Weather Service forecast pages on weather.gov. And any radars that you see here obviously are dated, so if it comes to severe weather later today, please check your local weather service forecast office for latest radars, watches, and warnings on weather.gov. Okay, so there is Hector, and you can see from the overnight infrared that the eye has become slightly less distinct. The system is looking slightly more ragged, I guess is maybe the way to describe it. We're kind of picking hairs here. It's still a Category 3 hurricane. The eye is clearly indicating that we're seeing this track basically to the west, maybe a shade north of due west. And this is going to be a very critical time with regards to the forecast going forward, because we are going to see whether Hector gains latitude here, and that is going to be going to play the key role as to how close this comes to the big island of Hawaii. A couple of things regarding that, by the way, is that weather models seem to be pretty much close together on where they're going with all this, and that even as it gains latitude, it may eventually take a turn, will probably take a turn back to the west. Now, while this might bring the hurricane closer to the big island of Hawaii, you can see how Hawaii runs southeast to northwest, the island chain. So unless this storm is moving on a west-northwest course, it's likely to pass. The distance increases from the islands to the northwest as the hurricane goes by to the south. So just bear that in mind. Right now, it would seem like this could be a close call for the big island of Hawaii. There is room for error. Also, please, and you'll see it on the wider satellite view, this is a small hurricane. The radius of winds very, very tight. So we are, you could have this thing pass less, basically, if the center passes 60 miles south of the big island, maybe you might have fringe gales right along the immediate coast, but the land impacts would be minimal. This would have to come very close to the island itself in order to cause impacts, but margin of error is there, so we want to respect that. At the 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time position, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 14.4, 136.9, moving west at 12 miles an hour. It's been on that west course rather steadily now for a couple of days, and top winds at 125 miles per hour. And here's the Hurricane Center's interactive map when we it's not even letting me put the gales on for some reason. Let me see if I can fix this. So here's the track, and you can see where the Hawaiian Islands are. By the way, this is all available on the Hurricane Center website at nhc.noaa.gov. And if you click on, you'll click on where it says interactive warnings cone interactive map. This will come up, and then you can just kind of plug in the options on the menu. For some reason, the wind, the wind here. You should be able to click on the gales, 50 knots, 64 knots, hurricane force winds, and you'll see the wind field. But for some reason, it's not letting me do that right now. They're probably in the process of updating it. But here is the look of the track. The margin of error, of course, increasing over time, but even the northern fringe of the margin of error in terms of the forecast, which kind of splits the model guidance, still passes to the south. And I would suspect that, if this track holds, which is, a good 100 miles or more south of the Big Island, of the southern tip of the Big Island of Hawaii, that at the very worst, you probably would be for some fringe gales to touching the south shore of the Big Island. And the distance, of course, much larger from Honolulu, well to the south of Honolulu. There will be obviously marine impacts here with regards to waves. It's going to get quite rough, and that is going to last for several days or more, certainly. Now, want to spend a little bit of time with the forecast going forward. First off, here are the hurricane tracking models, and they are all continuing to show a rather clustered outcome. They are all bunched up, and now none of the dynamical models, the hurricane tracking models, none of them have the storm going over the islands. They all have it moving to the south. They are still very, very tightly clustered together. The spread here is only about 150, 200 miles tops from top to bottom, from the furthest north to the furthest south. And the track is straight west. So this leads to a fair degree of fair confidence, let's say, that the impacts here at the Hawaiian Islands will be minimal. But this is pretty close, folks. And the key to all of this, we've been talking about the fact that there's this big ridge north of the Hawaiian Islands that is really being the driver here with regards to how this hurricane is going to behave. But you can watch it as it moves on the GFS. And we've got a track here to the west-northwest at this point going into Monday and Tuesday. This is where it's going to gain some latitude. If you look to the north of the hurricane, you see that little green, very thin green line that's up there that runs northeast southwest. That is part of a trough that extends southward, and there's just enough of a weakness that trough is pulling it northward. Now, once we get past Tuesday, however, the ridge, you can see there's higher pressures as you go northwest of the Hawaiian Islands, and also a little narrow high northeast of the Hawaiian Islands. That ridge northwest of the Hawaiian Islands is building, and as a result, it turns Hector back to the west. So by the time this is at 2 p.m. now on Wednesday, it is moving to the west. And notice the core of how the GFS models the core of this is all offshore. There's some fringe showers on the northern end, but the gales are going to be where those isobars are tighter, and it's way to the south. This is a small hurricane in terms of the geographic size. And then the track continues to the west, so the distance between where the hurricane is and the islands to the north increases. Just to give you an idea with the GFS, by the way. So roughly 19 north is where the southern tip of Hawaii is, and this is at 16.7. So it's 2.3 degrees So let's round that off to 2 degrees. That's at least 120 nautical miles to the south, or to as much as 2.5 degrees, which would be 150 nautical miles to the south. In either case, we would keep the gales and the strong winds pretty much offshore. And then after that, the track continues on to the west or west-northwest, crosses the international date line, and then gets a name change when it does that. And then it's Japan's Weather Service forecast problem after that. Now, let's look at the upper air and go over this again, because this is what we're going to be watching now. And I'm just going to back it up. You can kind of see, if you look in the upper right, that is the bottom of a trough that extends down from the Northeast Pacific. There's a high-pressure ridge, that's upper high-pressure ridge over and northeast of the Hawaiian Islands. That it's a narrow ridge, but it basically puts up a brick wall to prevent this from recurving north and northeastward. And then the ridge builds strongly north of the Hawaiian Islands, and it forces this to go on a westward track. So this is Wednesday afternoon. Let's we'll put it on the paint box now, so you can take a look at it from that perspective, and I can do a little bit of drawing here, which is what I like to do, at least to try to illustrate what we have here. You're seeing we're pretty far south, so we're not seeing a whole lot of jet stream here, but that's really, that's just how it is. Now, here's your trough, okay? So let's put that there. So here's your trough from your northeast, from the cyclone that's up in the northeastern Pacific. Doesn't extend very far to the south at this point. And of course, the hurricane is long gone. It's missed it, so it's not going to be responding to that. Here's your upper high right there, okay? So, it's responding to this upper high and the flow around the high being clockwise. So we're talking about easterly winds here. Here's the base of the ridge, is the way the model sees it. And of course, you've got Hector that's trapped underneath it. So this high, the high that's up northwest of Hawaii, that big upper high, that is going to be key over the next 3 days. How much does it strengthen? The weakness that's out there as the hurricane approaches Hawaii, is it going to be enough to pull it further north, where we wind up seeing it closer to the Hawaiian Islands, like we had with models showing back days ago? Or is this high going to be more important and force this thing eventually? Yes, it'll gain a little bit of latitude and then turn it back to the west. The models are very consistent here. And by the way, the GFS is actually the furthest north of all the models. The European is further south. There's, the weakness that is out east of the right along the international date line, or just west of the international date line, is too far west for it to have any impact at this particular point. So the ridge is what we have to watch now, and how models handle this. Is it going to be stronger than modeled? Is it going to be weaker than modeled? And that holds the key. And there's that upper high, just basically envelopes Hector around it as it centers itself just north of the Hawaiian Islands by Thursday afternoon, and then it goes out. A trough out near 180 near the international date line pulls it to the north, but it doesn't pick it up. And then another ridge builds in the Pacific, and it responds by turning it more toward the west. The European has consistently been further south than all the other models, and this is because the ridge is stronger on the European. The trough here, you can see you can barely see the trough up in the upper right trying to push down. The European does create a weakness, but Hector's already long gone. This would be the point, by the way, on Monday. During Monday, the narrow east-west ridge there, if that is weaker, that will cause Hector to gain some latitude. And then, of course, the upper high builds north of the Hawaiian Islands, and that shoves it even further south. The pass on the European is actually over 2.5 degrees to the south. Whereas the GFS, I'd say you could probably argue it was about 2 to 2.5 degrees. So this is over 2.5 degrees to the south. So it's over 150 miles south. And of course, the Europeans' view would suggest that, yeah, there'll be marine impacts, but fringe gales wouldn't even get close. And then it goes, on its merry way, west-northwest and gone and over the date line, just like the others. And meanwhile, okay, before we look at the Atlantic, by the way, here is the view of the tropical Pacific and just how busy this is. And bear in mind that when usually the rule is that when the Pacific is active, the Atlantic is not. Whether the Pacific is very active, the Atlantic is not. It's not that we can't have storms on both sides, because we certainly have seen that. But when the Pacific is very active like this, it is usually not. The conditions on the Atlantic side are usually not conducive. And if you look at the tropical Pacific, everything is spinning. Okay, from off the coast of Mexico on westward. And there you can see Hector is now going to be shortly exiting this range as it crosses 140 degrees west. And then the handoff will occur as Miami will drop coverage, and we will start to see coverage from Hawaii. And the National Weather Service Forecast Office and Hurricane Center, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, which is out of Hawaii, it'll pick it up. So 140 is the magic spot. So once it crosses there, it is done. We do also, by the way, have a new tropical depression in the Pacific and the potential for probably two others to form here. I'm not going to really spend any time on these because they're not impacting any land areas. Meanwhile, out in the Atlantic, about the only thing worth looking at this point is the system in the Central Atlantic. And by the way, if you look at the tropical Atlantic, you can plainly see just how anemic everything is in terms of the tropical waves that are out there. We've got upper lows running all over the place. You've got that big upper low that's in the Central Atlantic that is dominating the upper flow over a large portion of the Atlantic, of the subtropics in the Central Atlantic, and meanwhile, it's non-existent in terms of any kind of convection and thunderstorm activity going on off the southeast coast, because we have this upper high that's sitting there. And in the Caribbean, most of the clouds are getting blown off from west to east, which tells you that we've got very strong winds in the upper atmosphere, and wind shear is not the friend of tropical storm development. But here's the visible loop of the system out in the Central Atlantic, and there's definitely a low-level circulation here, no question about that. You can see the swirl, but these are all low clouds. You don't have any thunderstorms. There's hardly any convection that is going on. And by the way, if you notice, when some of these thunderstorms start to develop, you see how the cloud tops are actually getting blown from north to south. There's actually some significant northerly shear going on here because of the big upper low that this thing is kind of rotating around. It's on the west side of this large upper low. You can see the development of convection well to the east in response to that upper low. Also, there looks like there's some turning. You can see there's some turning here to the east of that. There's one low-level center that's dropping to the west. There's some turning here. I'm not so sure if that's more of a mid-level, or that could be the mid-level or upper-level circulation with the upper low and not the low-level circulation. But until you get convection to develop in and around the center, this is not going to be any kind of a tropical system. And the other thing is, the bottom line is, as we said yesterday with regards to this, is that it's heading out to the northeast eventually, even though it continues to move to the southwest. It's at about 32 north, and the longitude, it's actually, it's getting close to 32 degrees north and at about 50 degrees west. There was some indication back days ago that as that upper ridge builds in the off the southeast coast of the United States, it extends itself, and has extended further east, that maybe this could somehow could possibly get underneath it and move westward. But that does not appear to be the case, because in another 2 days, you're probably going to have a fairly well-defined trough and short wave that's going to pick it up and kick it away to the northeast. Meanwhile, the weather coming back home, I want to start with the GFS upper air because there are significant differences that develop here in the longer term. So with that and versus the European, but there's everything's in sync here with what's going on now. Upper high building along the southeast coast of the United States, ridge building up into the northeast, and that means the next 2 days are hot. They're humid, but they're not crazy hot, and also the amount of shower and thunderstorm activity is going to be at an absolute minimum the next 2 days, which is very good news, especially for the folks in Western Virginia and in West Virginia that have gotten so much rain in the last a couple of months, on the order of 2 to 3 feet in some places or more. And we had the story about the dam in Lynchburg that was at risk for breaking, and it looks like they had gotten that stabilized. So the lack of rain now for the next couple of days is certainly good news. Now, the upper flow is going to try to bring the westerlies down as we go through this week. So there will be a cold front that will try and push through here in the east on Tuesday night, Wednesday. But the problem is how much of a push is it's going to have. The GFS today has given it maybe a little bit more of a push so that we could see a lowering of humidity for a day or so at the end of this week. Not a whole lot, but enough to make it at least a little more comfortable and get rid of these, what I've been calling bad hair weather. And there's more troughing on the GFS going through the weekend and into next week, which is a totally different solution. It's night and day from what the European has, by the way. So here's the European, the GFS. So just to show you, so here we have the GFS at a week from basically a week from today. And here's the European for the same time frame. It has, it's trying to create this trough, but it responds by basically building the ridge back into the east by the time we get to the first part of next week. But the GFS has got a different look here. The GFS has the more troughing in the east come 8, 9, and 10 days from now. It wants to take this energy that it drops back down into Ohio and Pennsylvania, and then just kind of hang it there and then gradually lift it up to the northeast. The upper high does eventually build in the southeast, but it doesn't have the same firepower that the European would imply. And actually, the GFS has more of an increasing northwesterly flow out of Canada towards we get into mid-month, which would be a positive if you want lower humidity and some slightly cooler air to come into play. So I think we're going to have a lot of issues to resolve here as far as the long term is concerned in the eastern part of the U.S. anyway. And here's the surface map for today. And again, minimal, if hardly any shower or thunderstorm activity at all until we get to late Tuesday night when that cold front comes through. And you can see how the front kind of gets hung up there right along the east into Thursday. Then there's just a little bit of a push. You get some slightly drier air. A weak high builds in from the north, so maybe the humidity comes down a bit for Friday and Saturday. And then later Thursday into Friday, and then Saturday we start to see another round with that next trough that's dropping back into western New York and into Ohio. So it looks like another front gets hung up here as we move into next weekend and into the early part of the following week. So a lot of, as always, a lot of nonsense to contend with regards to the weather around here, and actually pretty much just about everywhere. Also, I wanted to point out, I know it's at day 10, but if you look up here, up in the upper left, there's a little streak of blue there up in southwestern Canada in the mountains. That is at hour 2:40. So should we show the snowfall forecast map? Why not? There it is, folks. Right in there. There's this little blob. So we are at August 5th now. So starting in, I believe, in 2 days on the 7th, we begin to see the average high and the average low start to drop down, tick, 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 little by little. And then, of course, it does accelerate. So there is your first tiny little sign that the peak of the summer season is here, and temperatures have no place to go but down. So I gave that to you for all you snow lovers out there, okay? So now at this point, let's come back front and center, and let me come on to the chat with you guys and take a look at what you've been saying. Sundays. Small crowd as always, because after all, it is Sunday. You can watch me live, David Schlotthauer, beginning 10 a.m. PDT on Hector, 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Very good. I always encourage folks to, that are into weather to, do their thing, but to make sure you do it responsibly. That is, I think, front and center what you should focus on. D.O. Nankamar, Hurricane Hector spaghetti models have them clustered, but the track of the cone is touching part of Hawaii. That ridge is key. If that ridge is a little weaker, we're talking about, we are talking about a handful of mile shift, but also remember, this is a small hurricane, so you're going to have to get, for any serious land impacts to occur, it's going to have to come almost right on or just barely south of the big island of Hawaii. It could pass 60 or 70 miles to the south, and there will be, as I said, marine impacts, but land impacts would be pretty much minimal. Bill Box, since warmer water increases strength in hurricanes, what are your thoughts of the last 3 months of lava pouring into the water? The bigger impact is the El Nino, the possible El Nino that is developing with the watch, the El Nino watch, and ocean water temperatures in the Pacific are above normal, not by a lot, but in that particular area around Hawaii, they are about a degree or so above average. But ocean water temperatures near Hawaii are not that warm, believe it or not. I mean, they're warm. They're at 80, 81-ish, but they're not sitting at 84, 85. And Hawaii has a habit of watching hurricanes, major hurricanes, all around it, only to have them fall apart before they make landfall. I mean, so it's always been a surprise to me at how few hurricanes actually move over Hawaii, but they seem to be in a very shielded area. Not to say that they don't get them. Obviously, they do get them, and they do have impact from them. But it's like hitting a very small target. Now, look, the lava. That's a question for somebody. Somebody's else has got to answer that. I mean, I imagine it would. The impact of lava going in there is going to be, in shallow waters. Obviously, it's going to have some impact. I don't know. I think you're going to have to ask that question. I know in some ways that sounds at first glance, you're thinking, okay, lava falling into the ocean, the huge ocean, it's not going to heat it up. It's certainly not going to heat it up enough to have any kind of impact in terms of the strength. The heat from the rock is going to be readily absorbed by the ocean there. That is a large. That ain't it's not falling into a swimming pool. Let's put it like that. But I would like to defer this to someone that knows this stuff, that's expert in geology and so on, and could address this issue. Could address your question a bit better than I can, but I would think that it would have minimal impact, if any at all. James CIP, thanks for hitting Super Chat this morning. Really appreciate that. Let's see. What is more dangerous, tsunamis or storm surge? A&M weather. The tsunami is going to be more dangerous, more than likely. The thing is that you don't see tsunamis very often. You do see storm surges with hurricanes when they make landfall. So I think that there's two ways to answer the question. The tsunami is more, the tsunami obviously is more dangerous and would have bigger impact, but they are far rarer. The storm surge is something that we see more often. So, you know, that's the one that, from in all practical purposes, that is the storm surge is what you're going to be dealing with more often than not, rather than tsunami. And Timothy, you kind of said, yeah, like I said, the Pacific is huge, and any heat from lava is going to be dispersed. Um, Dave R. Do I remember a weatherman named Jim Smith? He was in Baltimore and Florida TV. I don't. Um, I actually many years ago did interview for a job in Baltimore, but I'm not really too familiar with who's on the air. I have to tell you quite honestly, and I think I may have said this before or a few times. I'm not the right person to come to when it comes to knowing who's on the air in local markets and who isn't. I've gotten to a point where I barely pay attention. I mean, I do know who some of the bigger players are in the New York market, obviously. I used to know who the bigger players were in some of the other nearby markets, Philadelphia, for example, Boston. But I just don't pay attention to that much stuff anymore. I guess it has to do with the fact that I'm almost 60. So, I'm not looking to go to take my career to another level at this point in my life. I'm perfectly happy doing what I'm doing and expanding on my work on YouTube and on Facebook and Twitter, and also on right here on my YouTube channel. Yeah, Timothy, I saw your picture there. I actually still haven't had a chance to go back and look at the race, so don't tell me who won. I want to go back and look at the race replay. I'll do that a little bit later today. But yeah, I saw the cloud shots you had, and with all the thunderstorms that were running around. But thankfully today, all that stuff is out of the way. Let me wrap it up at this point, folks. Welcome, by the way. I want to welcome anybody who's watching here from Hawaii. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and we'll continue to cover this during this week. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button, and it doesn't cost you anything, and you get notifications when new videos come up. I've been live streaming once today, and this is going to be the one live stream today because it's a Sunday. I want to go in my pool, and I've got a barbecue to go to. So, just kind of taking it easy today. However, I do have a piece on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, that I wrote on the tropics and on Hurricane Hector. So if you want to read more about this, you can check that out there at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. We are going to be back to my usual Monday through Friday live stream schedule. So that would probably be 6 p.m., although I may consider doing it at 8 p.m. so I can have the latest advisory. We'll see. Depends on how my schedule is. And then, of course, the Joe and Joe Weather Show with Joe Rayo will be on it back tomorrow at 9 p.m. roughly Eastern Time on Facebook. And as always, just a mention to the fact that you can link to Amazon and to Ebates and do your shopping. I'm a member of the affiliate programs of both Amazon and Ebates. It's a way for my channel to earn fees by linking to Amazon and Ebates and their affiliate sites. You get your stuff, and Ebates will give you cash back, and Amazon and Ebates throws me back some coin. I get a few cigars out of the deal, and everybody is happy. So thank you for those of you who have done that. Thank you for those of you who have hit Super Chat, James CIP, today, as you rang the bell. It's good. I'm not looking to get rich doing this, folks. Believe me. I'm, I usually don't really, mention it or ask about it. But I appreciate the generosity when those of you who have done this in the past, and those of you who may consider doing this in the future. I get a cigar, a cup of coffee, and I'm a happy camper. Thank you again. Okay, have a great day, folks. Enjoy your Sunday. We'll see you tomorrow. And again, just keep your eye out on my website for any late posts. Probably won't be doing much this afternoon, but I may do something later on tonight.